We've got a charged atmosphere for two rivals in the East Division. It's the Moonshine Throwdown. Marshall and Western Kentucky.
Intercepted by Key, and Key has one man and beat. A nice cut move. Edwards can't get him. Key takes it all the way. A pick six for Devin Key.
Here comes Talik Keaton to the sideline midfield. He's to the 40, gets a block, and here's goal! Touchdown, Marshall!
So please join me in welcoming the 21st head coach in WKU football history, Tyson Helton.
And Marshall's going to finish the year 9-4 and champions of the 2018 Gasparilla Bowl, the sixth consecutive bowl win for the Marshall Thundering Herd.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Had all intentions this week of leading the episode off with that unbelievably dominating performance by Western Kentucky down to Southern Miss. But Stephen, once again, is going to be late to the party because he's such a busy little bee. He'll be with us in a little bit. It's Trace and I starting things off right now, and it sucks that we have to start things off on a really sour note, but we have no choice but to go down to Charlotte and wrap up this game between Marshall and Charlotte, where Marshall had everything in front of them. They controlled their own destiny. All they had to do was win. It didn't have to be pretty. It didn't have to be flashy. They just needed to win. And they ran into the buzzsaw that was Charlotte. And for weeks, I had said I didn't feel good about this matchup, but I still picked the Herd to win fairly easily. I guess I should have went with more of my gut than my heart, because it proved to be more than the Herd could overcome. Yeah, the conditions were cruddy, and some fans will say that, but guess what, Trace? Both teams play in rain. One was able to execute, one was not. So the Herd drops to 7-4 on the season, 5-2 in conference, and those two losses, Jiminy Christmas, Middle Tennessee State and Charlotte.
Trash.
Ouch. Yeah, that's terrible. I mean, that's really terrible. 24-13, like I said, let's talk about those four indicators. Get these numbers. I want you to get these numbers. 422 yards to 230. Charlotte gets the edge. 33 minutes, 59 seconds to 26 minutes, 1 second. Charlotte outpossesses the Herd. 26 first downs to 13 first downs. Charlotte gets more first downs than the Herd. And turnovers are 3-2 in favor of Marshall, which is even worse that they managed to lose this game by 11 points. I mean, the Herd led 10-0 at one point, and then only managed to scrape together 3 points once again in the second half of a football game. It was utterly frustrating to watch. I can only imagine what it was like to be in the huddle and nothing was working, or just, standing there and watch Charlotte continue to move the chains when you knew what was coming. I knew what was coming. It was the read option all day long, pretty much. And it worked all day long, pretty much. Chris Reynolds, he absolutely tore up this Herd defense. 311 total yards, 2 touchdowns. Keeping with a very dangerous theme. And in passing, we say, those dual threat quarterbacks really give the Herd fits from time to time. But let me give you some stats. I just said 311 total yards, 2 touchdowns for Chris Reynolds. Let's remember all the way back to Ohio. Yeah, the Herd got that win. Nathan Rourke, 333 total yards, 4 touchdowns. How about Middle Tennessee State? We just talked about them beating the Herd. Austin O'Hara, 337 total yards, 2 touchdowns. The Herd just cannot really handle a dual threat quarterback, especially when their offense is doing nada. They just can't seem to overcome that type of adversity. Can't seem to figure out the mobile quarterback. Also in this game, Marshall allowed 2 100-yard rushers. Chris Reynolds, the aforementioned, and Benny LeMay, who we thought was doubtful to play, but you got to respect the guy who comes out and plays on senior day to try to get his team bowl eligible for the first time in program history. I mean, gutsy effort by Benny LeMay, and he got himself a 100-yard day to boot. The last note that I'm going to say personnel-wise is Charlotte's Victor Tucker had a wonderful game. 5 catches, 121 yards, and a touchdown. The 4th down touchdown that put the dagger in the herd with under a minute to go. But even more so, he drew about 2 or 3 pass interference calls that kept Charlotte drives going. 2 of those I know were on a 3rd down. It just boils down to the fact that Trace, it looked like Charlotte just wanted it more. They wanted to go to a bowl game more than Marshall wanted to control their own destiny. They handled the elements better. It looked like their coaches were more aggressive and better prepared. I mean, this was a hard pill to swallow. Very hard pill to swallow. So I'm going to let you talk about this game a little bit. I know you're feeling, once again, Trace Johnson's feeling some kind of way. So we're going to bring that segment back here since it's been about 5 weeks since he's had to speak on some stuff, and then we'll talk about stats. So Trace, Charlotte, and the herd, it's all yours.
Well, what have I been saying the whole season? Even when Marshall had a 5-game winning streak, even when they had that 2-game losing streak there in the end of September, what have I said that whole time? So hard to trust Marshall. Doesn't matter didn't matter how good they were playing, didn't matter how many wins they were racking up. I said I think every single week on here, still hard to trust them. And there you go. That's why. I don't think it's hyperbole at all to say that this is easily one of the worst losses Marshall's had in the Doc Holliday era. I don't think that's hyperbole at all. This is absolutely one of the worst from top to bottom in almost every single way. This game was a downright atrocity. It was an absolute joke the way that Marshall looked like they had never played in rain before in their life. It's just like you can look so anemic on offense if it's raining, but then Charlotte was in the same conditions and they were having no problems moving the ball. And Charlotte, unlike Marshall, actually played aggressive offensively even with the weather. Marshall, that's this Doc Holliday's brand. It's just like, we're just going to try to be as conservative as possible and not lose. Well, when you play to not lose, you're going to take the freaking L. So that's what happened. Charlotte played to win. They mixed it up, running the ball with the quarterback zone read stuff. They tried to go deep a bunch of times, and Marshall's cornerbacks played probably the worst games. The secondary in general probably played the worst game they played in years. This was an absolute joke. I mean, but it's just like you get used to it though, because that's the Doc Holliday way. Like every time when the chips are all on the table and you have to come out on top, that's what happens. I mean, literally, how can you have things more perfectly lined up for you if you're Marshall? You have a head-to-head over Louisiana Tech. You have a head-to-head over FAU. You have a head-to-head over Western Kentucky. All you have to do is beat 2 average Conference USA teams in back-to-back weeks, and you're playing for a championship at home. They can't even handle that. They lose to Middle Tennessee a few weeks ago. They're horrible. You lose to Charlotte now, who's average. But kudos to Charlotte because they really played really well for the most part. Kudos to them. Kudos to their head coach, a 34-year-old first-year coach, out-coaching a so-called recruiting guru in Doc Holliday, who's in his 60s, has been a Marshall for 10 years. Kudos to them because they really earned this one. I'm not even just saying that sarcastically because Marshall didn't deserve to win. The coaching was downright pathetic. This was a pathetic game all the way around. I don't really see how anybody could try to spin this in anything more than it is. But unfortunately, it looks like Marshall has no chance now to play for a conference championship. I mean, there's not no chance because they technically still could if FAU loses to Southern Miss. But as we know now, Southern Miss has a couple guys out probably, including the quarterback, likely going to be out against FAU. FAU's at home. I think they're like a 10-point favorite or something like that. So it's not looking good. But honestly, I don't even want – it would be embarrassing if Marshall even plays for a conference championship the way they choked this game away. I mean, that would just – I don't know. It's just like you get your hopes up every year, and then inevitably that game's going to happen every year. But that's the Doc brand. That's just how it is. That's the way it's going to be. Whatever. I mean, it was pathetic. I mean, there's no really better word for it. An absolute joke of a game. Absolute joke of a performance from everyone involved, basically except one unit. There's really the only one unit that was a saving grace for this game, which we'll get into later. But yeah, shame on the coaches and shame on just this game. It was that bad.
Well, on that note, let's talk stats. Isaiah Green had one of the worst games he's had this season. And, that includes the effort he put forth at Boise State. 6 of 17, 86 yards, 2 interceptions. Brendan Knox, one of the lone bright spots on offense. I will credit that offensive line because they and Brendan Knox almost got himself to 100 yards. 22 carries, 92 yards, but he can't do it all himself. Those 5 linemen and the running back cannot do it all themselves. The quarterback is going to have to help them in the pass game. 6 completions isn't going to do it. 2 interceptions is not going to do it. Also, Brendan Knox, your leading receiver on the day. 1 catch, 40 yards. And that was on that wild jump pass that Isaiah Green was just trying to avoid a sack, and he happened to look up and see Brendan Knox there, and he kind of flipped it to him. And, a broken play turned into a 40-yard gainer. Obi Obialo played in this game, by the way, tallying 1 catch for 22 yards. He was targeted several times. That brings up other questions about Obi and his availability. I mean, I guess it's all for naught if Marshall doesn't have to worry about playing for a conference title game, because now you're just looking at FIU in a bowl game, and that would be 4 games, and he could still come back, and if he chooses to redshirt and come back and play next year. Tavante Beckett continuing to have a all-conference USA first team, Conference USA Defensive Player of the Year type season. Another 15 tackles, 9 solo, 1 quarterback hurry, a fumble recovery, and a forced fumble. Amari Cobb, another great day, 9 tackles, 4 of those solo, and a tackle for loss. So it's night and day for the Herd defense as far as quarterback sacks go. A month ago, they were riding a historic streak of sacks. Something like, what was it, like 19 in 3 games or something like that.
Yeah.
They tallied a grand total of 0 sacks this week, and I think they just had 1 last week. Something is definitely awry on the Herd defensive line. I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with those mobile quarterbacks, but, Chris Reynolds dropped back plenty of times, so there were opportunities there. But it just was not for naught. 9 of 21, by the way, Chris Reynolds, 166 yards. Another 25 carries for 145 yards. I mentioned he had 311 total yards and 2 touchdowns. So, a couple of interceptions by the Herd secondary as well. Chris Jackson got 1. Najee Johnson got 1. But they ultimately didn't really matter. It's, great for those guys to make a play, but, it didn't really lead to any points of any count. Marshall had their chances. They were down deep. A drop pass, I believe, kept the touchdown off the board and made the Herd settle for a field goal. Justin Rowasser did a pretty good game. I don't know why I forgot to write his stats down, but I think he was, 2 for 2 or something. Yeah, 2 for 2, and he nailed the extra point. So both kicks, I do recall, were from 31 yards out. So Rowasser continues to have a good game, or a good season. Definitely got to be leading the charge for special teams MVP, player of the year, whatever you want to call him, definitely for the Herd. I mean, I don't know if he's going to land it on the all-conference squad or not, but that's not for us to decide. So, stats aside, the loss aside, let's talk about some grades. And I got to tell you from the outset, I am not looking forward to hearing this, but I am intrigued to hear your rationale. So, quarterback grade this week for Isaiah Green, 6 of 17, 86 yards, 2 interceptions.
Yeah, you're not looking forward to hear it, and I'm not looking forward to saying it, but here we are nonetheless. But quarterback grade this week, F-. I mean, come on. What else can you give it? I mean, 6 for 17, 86 yards, no touchdowns, 2 picks, 10.3 QBR. Bruh, like, you can't give that anything except an F-. And like, as inconsistent and as many question marks that has been raised about Isaiah Green this year, and as many fans that have kind of been on his case, he'd been playing really well before this. I mean, he'd been playing good football, clean football, and maybe a quarterback obviously would struggle more passing the ball in the rain. So not all of that is on him, because a lot of it is just the offense is just lack of, creativity and a lack of aggressiveness too kind of hurt, because like they really didn't even let him throw the ball that much. Like in the first half, he really didn't even get a chance to throw it hardly any. But, I mean, even at that, I mean, it was just a really bad game from him. I mean, he had been playing a lot better. And another stat that I thought was really eyebrow-raising is the fact that the whole game, Marshall only had one completion to a wide receiver. I mean, come on now. Like, how are you going to expect to win the game when you complete 6 passes a whole game and only one of them is to an actual receiver? It's just not going to cut it. I mean, Isaiah Green, I mean, yes, this was a horrible game, but he's not the reason they lost the game at all. He's not the reason they lost. But, I mean, you can't ignore those stats and just rough game. I mean, you can't ignore it. So, unfortunately, it's an F-.
Yeah, I don't think I'm saying that he's the reason that the Herd lost the game, but I will stand behind saying that he did not do anything to help them win the game.
Oh, none at all.
I'll say that. I mean, that nobody can argue that point.
No.
Not the reason they lost, but six completions all day is not doing anything really to help. So offensively as a whole, like I said, held to just 230 yards, 13 points, only 3 again in the second half. What a running theme. What a terrible running theme for the Herd in 2019.
Yep, another F. This is just regular F, not F-. But, I mean, good God almighty. I mean, you literally 13 points scored and only 6 were from the offense. This is against a Charlotte defense that was giving up over 35 points a game. And Marshall scored 6 offensive points in 4 quarters. Rain, weather aside, that's unacceptable. That's absolutely a joke. 230 total yards, 2 turnovers, 2 of 11 on third downs. And one thing that I noticed a lot, too, is they struggled to block Charlotte's D-line a lot this game. I noticed those couple of DNs are really good. That Highsmith's a great player for Charlotte. And they really got some pressure on Green and got him down at least twice that I can think of. And they did a good job with that. I mean, they ran the ball pretty well. Brendan Knox had a good game. But, man, just brutal offensively to this game. I mean, you're going against one of the worst. I mean, I don't remember what I wrote down for Charlotte. Oh, yes, now I do because I just looked at it. But heading into the game, they were 119th in the country in scoring defense. You score 6 freaking points offensively. No, sorry. There's no way anybody can defend that crap. That is as bad as it gets. This offense is atrocious. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. So, gotta be an F in anybody's book.
Yeah, I want to take a note there on Highsmith. He is probably one of the – no, it's not probably. He is one of the short list contenders for Conference USA Defensive Player of the Year.
Absolutely.
Without a doubt. I mean, in all honesty, I'm sure there are other guys out there, but the list should really come down to Highsmith, Malone for Western, Tavante Beckett for the Herd, and maybe – I can't think of his name right now, but there's a defensive back I think that plays for Louisiana Tech.
Yeah,
that is getting a lot of pub. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank right now, but it is what it is. Those are really your 4 guys that should be the front runners for Defensive Player of the Year. All right, speaking of defense, let's move along. What's your grade for the defense this week?
Well, it's not a good grade. I gave him an F. I mean, it might be a little bit unfair just because they were kind of on the field a little too long. But I mean, time of possession wise, it was only about -7, so it's not like they were on the field like, a lot more. I mean, yeah, it's a little bit more, but I mean, Lord have mercy. The 24 points allowed. I mean, that's not bad. That's a winnable game if your offense does anything. You can win a game giving up 24 points, but allowing 422 total yards, 256 rushing. They could not stop the quarterback runs, the zone read. They couldn't stop it if their life depended on it. I mean, they absolutely gashed them the whole game. And then, like you said, Benny LeMay, who was listed as doubtful heading into this game, rushed for 100 yards. I mean, the guy's not even healthy. And he's running for 100 yards on this defense that had been shutting down pretty much everybody against the run the last month. It makes no sense. And then just an insane amount of pass interferences. I mean, this was an absolute horrendous display of secondary play. I mean, outside of those 2 interceptions, which were really just bad throwing balls, it really wasn't even great plays they made. They just kind of, whatever. But my God, there were so many pass interferences in this game that kept drives alive, that extended plays or extended drives. I mean, Jesus criminy, it was bad. I mean, just the technique is horrible. The technique was so bad. I mean, I don't like to call out players, and I'm not going to call out players because a lot of that, I think I credit that to coaching, the fact that they can't teach them technique better than that. My opinion on the fact that Marshall corners and safeties haven't turned their head in coverage in God knows how many years. My opinion on that, and it reared its ugly head again. And then, but the only really good thing the defense did the whole game was they got 2 interceptions, like I said. Other than that, there really wasn't a whole lot else. So defense didn't really help them out at all in this one, so I'm going to say F.
Well, I do want to go back and mention a couple of things that you said. You said they gave up 24 points. Yes, that's true. But let's not forget that last touchdown was with under a minute to go to put the dagger. So, it could have easily been a 17-13 game. It wasn't, and I'm not trying to justify it. I'm just saying, Charlotte took a chance. They stayed aggressive, and they hit that chance with under a minute to go to seal the game. And the defensive yardage does get a little bit skewed because you mentioned those PI calls that did extend drives. A couple of those did come on third down, and that's just an absolute killer. You're off the field if you just don't make the penalty. You're off the field.
Just turn your head and look for the ball. And
it just wasn't to be. I will give credit to the front seven, even though they didn't get a sack, even though they did give up 200-yard rushers. You can't expect to have drives get extended and then just be at the top of your game all game long, in those type of conditions. You're going to get pushed around, and they did get pushed around. And, and it's situations where they might have otherwise not gotten pushed around as much. But, hey, wet field's a wet field. It doesn't take much to get a little extra leverage and, you've lost that battle. But, again, the bright spot, Tavante Beckett, he had that awesome forced fumble. He just kind of stuck his hand in there and knocked the ball out because that was going to be a first down, to be honest with you. So that was just a heads-up play. And, of course, the scoop and score was a big deal. Darius Hodge, what a play, But, you can't – I know we're talking defense here, but you just can't do 6 points on offense in a whole football game against the 119th ranked scoring defense. I'd forgotten all about that stat. So how about special teams? Roy Rosser goes 2 for 2. Lefevre has a decent day in those conditions. And not to be lost in those conditions. Matt Beardall, excellent day snapping the ball.
Absolutely. This was the only bright spot in this hot turd of a game with special teams. I'm giving them an A. It was really good. Honestly, they took so long. Game is focused now. It took so long to get it took them a while. I was kind of little hard on the special teams the last few weeks. Not hard, but I was kind of waiting for that complete special teams performance. I think this was it. They did a really, really good job in this game. Like you said, 2 for 2 on field goals. There's a really good kick return by Sheldon Evans. I think it was the opening kickoff of the game. He returned to 30-plus yards. Good punt return by Early. The punt return they put back there, that was impressive. He had a good one for that. And then the receiver, 42 yards to punt, had 2 inside the 20. The touchdown on the blocked punt by Darius Hodge, huge play. If it wasn't for that, Marshall would have got absolutely torched in this game. And then the kick coverage was good because there was multiple touchbacks. I don't think they hardly allowed any returnable kicks. From top to bottom, this special teams performance was really good. And if they would have won the game, I probably would have given an A+ because it was a really good performance on special teams. So that's something they definitely, hopefully, can use moving forward. But I'll give them an A. I thought it was really good.
Well, I'm not going to discredit that A, but I'm going to tell you something right now. I would rather you give them an F and the Herd win because for the last 5 weeks you've been griping about special teams and the Herd's been winning games. But
kickoff coverage primarily.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We've come to that point in the episode. Coaching for the week.
Coaching for the week gets an F-. Starting right off the bat here, the game plan offensively was like a middle school team. Outside of 2 back-to-back reverse type plays that they ran, I don't remember when that was, second quarter, I think. Outside of that was a middle school called game offensively. I understand the weather conditions were bad and everything. God knows everybody's going to keep saying that over and over that are, blind apologists are going to keep saying that. But sure, you literally ran 3 plays. All they tried was a run up the middle. They let Green run it, and then they did some little dump down passes, and there was nothing there. I don't see how you're going to try to score any points playing that way. You don't want to go out there and have have the rain throw it 50 plus times in that rain and stuff. But Lord, what are you doing? Like, how are you expecting to do anything offensively or score any points when you're running that middle school offense? I mean, it made no freaking sense at all. And then, of course, like we keep saying for weeks, second half, this was bad. Lord, it was terrible. I mean, you literally scored 3 points in the second half when you led the game the whole first half, and you come out and absolutely just lay a dud. And I mean, good God, how is that going to win you a game? It's not, and it showed. No adjustments at all, none made whatsoever. They couldn't stop the quarterback runs. They couldn't figure out how to match up with that. They couldn't stop any of it. Offensively, no adjustments at all. They just kept running the same gutless, cowardly offense that's just trying to milk clock, trying to be safe, trying to play not to lose. And what happens when you play not to lose? You lose. And there you go. And then just unprepared. I mean, you have to have some type of idea that it's going to rain like cats and dogs that whole game. But yet it looked like they had never played in rain before in their life. I mean, it made no sense. How you're not more prepared for that, I'll never understand. And then, of course, didn't play aggressive enough, but that's been the case for a long time. Marshall never plays aggressive offensively, and that's a microcosm of Doc Holliday as a head coach. Sorry, but it just is. He's never been an aggressive coach as far as play calling or offensive mind. So, I mean, just overall, this was an absolute horrible game by the coaching. You have everything. You have to get your team ready to play in a game like this. You have 2 games left with a conference championship on the line, and that's how you play? Really? Sorry. There's no way anybody can defend that. So F- is probably a little too kind, but I'll say F-.
Let me ask you a question. And, hindsight is always 20/20. But at the time, it's not like you don't realize it's raining like crazy. You just said that. So at what point in the game do you just not go, this whole pass thing's not really working. We're going to do it every now and then to keep them honest. But why don't we run up and try this wildcat? Let's get gains. Let's drop Isaiah Green back. Let's run him. I mean, these guys can run.
Yeah.
They've done it. They can do it. I mean, Isaiah Green had 7 carries for 18 yards, and that's not fabulous, but that does also factor in 2 sacks that he took.
Yep.
So the ability was there. Xavier Gaines had 2 carries for 20 yards, for crying out loud. Yep. This just seems like it should have been, as a team, Marshall should have had freaking 50 rush attempts as a team and just see where it goes. And I mean, it is, whatever. 6 of 17 passing. Like I said, hindsight's 20/20, but it just wasn't working. So that's a huge adjustment that was not made, or, maybe it was mentioned or brought up and it was, no, we're not doing that. I don't know. I'm not in the huddle, but it worked for Charlotte. It worked for Reynolds. It worked for LeMay. I mean, Brendan Knox almost puts together a 100-yard day, but I mean, this game had all the makings for run. We talked about that hurt offensive line. We talked about how any given play and a little bit of leverage can open up a huge hole, and it worked for that. And it worked for Charlotte. I just don't understand why we didn't see Isaiah Green run more, why we didn't see Xavier Gaines run more. They kept trying that little swing pass out of the backfield to the tight end, and a couple times it was dropped, and a couple of times it went for nothing. I mean, that's not a run play. You know what I mean?
No.
Like that's not a viable substitute for a run play. Especially when you've tried it 4 times and it didn't work once. Okay, so overall you've got a whole bunch of Fs here and you've got 1 A. This looks like a solid 0.6 GPA. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. So what do you got for an overall grade?
Well, even with arguably the best overall special team performance of the year, especially given the weather conditions, this is still an F game by far.
Yeah, it is.
I hate to say it because the special teams really were good. I mean, I give them a lot of credit, especially in that kind of crappy weather and all that. I mean, on the road like that, I give the special teams a lot of credit, but everything else, man, just brutal stuff. I mean, you can literally win that game as ugly as you want, but as long as you win, that's all that matters. They couldn't even manage it. I mean, you literally you were up 10-0 first of all. That was a good start, and then at one point they were up 10-0 and they had the ball offensively, and it looked like they had a drive going, and then of course just nothing. So, I mean, it's just these are games that's what I tweeted. Games like this separate contenders from pretenders. Marshall's a pretender. And a good coach or a great coach or an above average coach gets a team to win a game like this. That's just the way it is. Marshall is a more talented football team than Charlotte. They have more talent. They got better players. They got everything favors Marshall against Charlotte. Charlotte has no business beating Marshall in football. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. I know Charlotte is getting better. They're an improving program, and that's really good for them, and it's good for the conference to see some of those bottom dwellers start rising up. They're going to a bowl game now, it looks like. Got a really young, energetic head coach. They're heading in the right direction, but they're heading in the right direction. They haven't reached that direction yet. Marshall should not lose to Charlotte in football. They shouldn't have lost to them even when they were 3-9 in 2016. They shouldn't lose to them now when they were 7-3 and controlled their own destiny in Conference USA East Division. No freaking excuse for it. They blew it. I mean, I know technically they're still alive for the conference title game to win the East, technically speaking, but in my opinion and in my mind, they blew it against Charlotte. There's no coming back from it. They blew it. Absolutely blew it. So, F overall.
Yeah, I got no problem with teams like Charlotte improving and raising their status amongst their conference peers. The problem is they should be gaining 6 wins against UTEP, against they beat North Texas. They should be beating the teams below them, the Old Dominions, right? They shouldn't be beating Marshall. Like, it's 2-2. Marshall and Charlotte are 2-2 in the past 4 years. That's
unacceptable.
That's not something that should be happening. Yes, even in Marshall's worst season, they should never be losing to a team like Charlotte. So here's a bad question that I don't want to ask, but I have to ask because I'm afraid of what you're going to say. I'm not afraid. I don't necessarily want to hear what you're going to say. So what do we know about Marshall after 11 games?
We know Marshall's a bunch of pretenders. I mean, sorry, I hate to say it because this team had so much potential going and they had everything lined up perfectly for them, but we know they're pretenders. I mean, think about it. Think about it like this. There's been several Marshall Conference Championship teams within the last 20 years, the MAC Championship years, the one Conference USA Championship year. They've had teams that have had to grind out tough road wins against teams they're far better than. I remember like 99. I mean, they had a couple close games that year. 2000, they probably had a couple games. 2001, couple games probably. 2002, I remember one vividly when they were on the road at Central Michigan. They had a horrible played game, but still managed to pull it out in the end. They won by 23-18. And 2014, they were 10-0. They were playing really bad against UAB. They ended up pulling that game out. Like, championship teams find ways to win those types of games. So so that proves to me right there, Marshall's not a championship team. They couldn't do it. They couldn't go on the road and overcome rain, wind. Like, really? Come on now. Like, you couldn't handle that. Charlotte's not a bad team. I've seen a lot of Marshall fans saying Charlotte's like a horrible team. They aren't bad at all. I mean, they're an average Conference USA team, but like I just said, there's no business, no reason at all Marshall should be losing to Charlotte right now or any year for the foreseeable future. But yet, here we are talking about it. 11-point loss to Charlotte on the road. Championship teams win games like that. But in my opinion now, Marshall's not a championship team. And when FAU beats Southern Miss next weekend, it'll be proven. So that's the sad truth about it.
Yeah. What I know about Marshall is that they had it all right in front of them and they let it slip away. And that's frustrating because those guys wanted that. I mean, those kids on the field wanted that. And their coaches let them down. They did not have them properly prepared to win that game. And you said championship teams go on the road and can grind out a tough win. Championship teams also don't lose to teams they're not supposed to lose to. And you're not supposed to lose to Charlotte. You're not. You grind out a tough win against FAU, and that's what we saw. They went on the road and ground out a tough win and came back in the second half, and they went and earned that win, And 2-3 weeks later, you turn around and this is what you have right after you really just play a great game against Louisiana Tech and you've got it all right in front of you and poof, it's gone.
Well, not only did they grind out a good win, really good win against FAU, they beat 3 of the better teams in the freaking conference. And within about 3 or 4 weeks of each other, they beat FAU, they beat Western, and then they beat Louisiana Tech. I mean, how Marshall's, that's another thing people talk about is Marshall plays down to their competition a lot. And I think that's a prime example of what happened. Another example of that against Charlotte and against Middle, obviously. They played down to their competition. And even against Rice to an extent, I mean, they didn't win that game that handily. So they kind of played down to Rice, but that's an issue too. But I mean, it's just what else, what can they do to actually get over the hump finally? I mean, it's not even, they just got to win the games they should win, for the love of God. I mean, it's not like it's rocket science. Don't lose to Middle Tennessee. Don't lose to Charlotte. How hard is that? Apparently very.
Well, I think what you got to do to get over the hump is you got to realize whoever's making these decisions is you can't just turn off and on offense like it's a switch.
No.
You either go with it full throttle for 60 minutes or however many minutes you possess the daggone ball, or you don't. You can't just go up and then turn it off and think, oh, it's getting a little tight again. We better turn it on again. It doesn't work that way. Football, unlike any other sport, is a game of momentum. Unlike any other sport. And if you've got the momentum, you better do all that you can to keep hold of the momentum and not let the opponent get any. But it is what it is. So let's look ahead to this week's game. It's senior day in Huntington. FIU is coming to town. Fresh off of a big win over Miami. No, not Miami, Ohio. The Hurricanes. FIU beat the Miami Hurricanes, folks, this past weekend, bringing their record to 6-5. They got bowl eligible. They're 3-4 in conference. So maybe they'll be ready for a letdown after that big win over Miami. That could go either way. Either they're jazzed up or they could be let down. So either way you slice it, the Herd better be ready to play in front of the home crowd to close out the season. That's all I know. All-time record between FIU and Marshall, 5-2 in the favor of the Herd. Throw a little stats at you there. Well, first, let's talk about the power index. Really likes Marshall this week. 73.5% chance to win. We're recording really early this week, folks, so there is no line yet as we record this podcast, but it'll obviously be out.
I actually think I saw one at -8 for Marshall.
Maybe so. On the ESPN app, there's not one. I'll put it
right. Right.
So there might be one out there somewhere, but it's not made its way to the ESPN app yet. FIU is a really weird team. They score 26, they allow 26. Marshall scoring 25 a game, allowing 22 a game. Take it for what it's worth. So as far as points allowed and points per game go, you think this is going to be a pretty even game. And it very well could be. Here's the difference, though, that could loom large and should actually loom large. FIU allows over 200 rushing yards per game on average, and Marshall just like 130, 140, something like that. And FIU only has 15 sacks as a team. So that tells me that they're fairly porous up front and they don't rush the passer very well. Two things that Marshall should absolutely try to game plan for. So before we talk about stats, players to look out for, yada, 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 let's talk about FIU. I want to know where your head's at with this matchup. I mean, how are you feeling about it? Probably a month ago, you felt a lot better about it than you do now. So what does Marshall do? Do they get the 8th win? Do they end the regular season on a 2-game skid? I mean, I need to know where your head's at.
Well, honestly, just 2 or 3 days ago, I felt a lot better about this game than I do now. I mean, it helps that, well, it doesn't help that Marshall's coming off of an absolutely abysmal game, but it also, another part of that is it doesn't help that FIU has some swagger now. I mean, you beat the so-called big brother in Miami, the Hurricanes, the U. I know everybody knows they're not what they used to be, and they haven't been that for a long time, but that is a program-changing win. I mean, that's the equivalent of if Marshall would actually beat West Virginia in football. That's the equivalent. That Absolutely. Is the 100% the equivalent. So imagine how big that would be for Marshall. It's probably even bigger for FIU because they're still a young program. Like, Marshall's done a lot in football, but FIU hasn't really done a whole lot. So, that's a huge win. And it definitely gives them a lot more mojo heading into this game, I think. Now, will it be? I mean, they're 6-5, so like they're bowl eligible, but if they lose the game, 6-6 does not guarantee them the bowl at all. I mean, they're still likely going to get one, but that doesn't guarantee it. If you can go 7-5 though, that'll guarantee it. So, and they're coming in now with Marshall reeling. I mean, yeah, Marshall's still playing technically for a division title, or at least a chance for a division title, but everybody knows this is not looking good for Marshall. They gave away their control of the division. They handed it right over to Lane Kiffin. They handed it right over to him. So Marshall's got a gut check. I remember a couple of years ago, this kind of reminds me of that Southern Miss game in 2017. Marshall had a really tough road loss in week 11 at UTSA, 9-7. And then they came back home, and everybody just kind of assumed they were going to win the game against Southern Miss. Now, they were pretty good that year, Southern Miss was, but they beat Marshall by 1 point. This game kind of reminds me, and Marshall ended that season on a 2-game losing streak to end the regular season. This kind of reminds me of that. Like, it kind of has that vibe to me right now. I don't know. I mean, FIU, we've been a little harsh on them this year, and I haven't been that impressed with them for a good reason. But, I mean, when you beat Miami, you're one of your measuring sticks in the state of Florida, and you beat them, that's going to resonate. And they now are coming in here a lot hotter than they've been all season. Will that pay off for them in the end against Marshall? I don't know. Will that be more detrimental to them? I don't know, because maybe they'll have a little letdown now, or maybe they'll come out and absolutely just play on fire. I don't know which it's going to be. But I'll tell you this, Marshall's got to worry about their own business before they worry about FIU, their business. So this is a big one. I mean, if Marshall wants to keep those slim hopes alive for playing for a conference championship, if they blew against Charlotte, then they got to win. So that's where we stand with it.
Yeah, Mason, I mean, you have to win. That goes without saying, but you have to win for a number of reasons. You're at home. It's senior day. You need to win to even have a slight chance to back into a conference championship game. And it all lined up for FAU. I mean, Western did Lane Kiffin a huge favor by knocking Jack Abraham out of that game with what looked like a knee injury. I don't know how serious it was, but he didn't come back in that game. So, you got a weakened offense that was a fairly high-scoring offense until they ran into that Western Kentucky defense. We'll talk about that here in a little bit when Steven can join the show. But I don't know what to make of FIU. And to be honest with you, if they lose this game against Marshall and they don't make it to a bowl game, it won't matter, because they'll say, hey, we beat Miami. That's our season. That's our season. Forever we'll be 6-6 and nobody will care, because we'll say, well, we beat Miami. And then all those fans will say, yeah, you guys were 6-6. I'm like, yeah, and you lost to a 6-6 team. So how about that? That was a program defining win last week for FIU. So how do you come into your next game off of a program-defining win? We'll see. I mean, that was a big win for not just their program, but how about Butch Davis? He used to coach the Hurricanes.
Yep.
Right? I mean, that's big. That was personal. You can't tell me that wasn't a personal game. And you got to think that this week it'll be personal a little bit for her defensive lineman Furman Silva, transferred from FIU, so he's got to be a little extra motivated to go out there and make some plays. He's going to want to play his best game in a Herd uniform. I just hope he, doesn't play a little bit too much past the whistle. We don't want to see any ejections or targeting or anything like that. But, I know he's going to be playing with a little bit of an extra gear, I would imagine. Probably got a lot of buddies that still play on that team, and you always want to get a good lick on your buddies when you're playing against them. Just let them know what's up. But anyway, let's talk about a few players. Quarterback James Morgan, 6'4", 213-pound senior. Look, man, preseason, a lot of folks thought it was going to come down between Mason Fine and James Morgan of who would be the best quarterback in the conference. And Morgan's season really hasn't panned out the way that a lot of us thought it was going to be. I mean, it's still okay. 6'4", 164 out of 282. 2,012 yards, 12 touchdowns. Get this, just 2 interceptions on the season. The man takes care of the football. A couple of running backs to take note of. Anthony Jones, the 5'11", 215-pound senior, leading rusher on the season, 149 carries, 750 yards, 8 touchdowns on the ground. Right behind him, running back Napoleon Maxwell, the 6', 215-pound senior, 110 carries on the season, 589 yards, and 7 touchdowns on the ground. 15 combined rushing touchdowns for their backs. A couple of wide receivers to look out for. Shamar Thornton, 5'11", 182-pound junior, the leading receiver, 45 catches, 567 yards, and 5 touchdowns. And then wide receiver Tony Gator the fourth, 5'9", 185-pound senior, 40 catches, 500 yards, and 3 touchdowns on the ground. A couple of linebackers really do the bulk of the duty on the FIU defense. Linebacker Jamal Gates, the 6'2", 225-pound junior, 73 tackles, leading tackler on this Panthers defense, 35 of those solo, half a sack, 1 forced fumble, and 1 interception. And then the senior, been a playmaker for several years, linebacker Sage Lewis, 6'1", 240-pounder, 63 tackles this year, 38 of those solo, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery, and 3 interceptions. So, what's the herd got to do? Take care of business, close out the season, the regular season, on a positive note, get a win, and push FIU to the definition of mediocrity. What's the herd got to do?
Well, 3 words. Play to win. Marshall needs to play to win. Don't play not to lose. Play to win. I mean, it's the simplest concept in sports probably, but yet it's such a problem with Marshall. It's such a problem with Doc Holliday teams. They don't play to win nearly enough. And this is senior day. This is the last home game, more than likely, for, 15 or 20 seniors, however many they have. I mean, you want to send them out the right way. I mean, it's a home game. It's senior day. It's the last game of the regular season with a slim chance of playing for a championship on the line. Play to freaking win the game. Open up the playbook offensively. Don't just do the same vanilla middle school crap they've been doing, especially against Charlotte. I want to see something that actually stands out and catches my attention. I mean, it's not that hard of a concept to grasp, but yet we never see it, hardly ever. And when we do, it's just sparingly used. I want to see a game that Marshall goes out there and they play to win. They play an aggressive game. I mean, I probably won't see it, but I want to see it. So that's my first point. Second point is, this is kind of a joke one, but it's not really, but it kind of is. Have the secondary look for the ball in midair. I mean, gee, many Christmas. It was so bad against Charlotte. I mean, and FIU, you know they're seeing that on tape, and you know that that's going to be a point of emphasis. They're going to attack the corners. They're going to try to go vertical on Marshall because they know the technique is so bad that they're probably, even if they don't complete the passes, that they're probably going to get a call on it, a pass interference. So that's a big test for Marshall this week, is they have to be in better position. They have to have a better technique to try to defend those passes. And they're going to have to just for a split second, just look for the ball. I mean, I understand the whole concept of, well, if you turn your head in coverage, then you lose a step. But if the ball is far enough down the field, how big of a step could you really lose? I mean, if you just see where it is, more times than not, you can make a play on the ball or even intercept the ball or knock it down. So they need to do that. I mean, they have to be in a much better shape secondary-wise this game, because FIU know for a fact they're going to see that on film and attack it. So there's 1 point emphasis right there. Next point is score points. I mean, I said that a few weeks ago. I think it was after the Middle Tennessee game or something. And they did. After that, they scored 31 against ODU. So they're going to have to score points. I mean, 13 points, 6 points offensively against Charlotte's not going to work. You're not going to beat FIU scoring 6 points offensively in 4 quarters. It's not going to happen by any stretch of the imagination. Heck, you're probably not going to beat any team in Conference USA, period, doing that. So you're going to have to score some points in this game. You're going to have to finish some drives. You're going to have to take advantage of an FIU run defense that, like you said, is giving up a lot of yards on the ground. Hopefully Brendan Knox can go out there and have a monster game. Hopefully Green can look a lot better than he did against Charlotte, complete some passes, make some throws, get Obialo involved. I don't know. They're going to have to score points, though. I mean, it doesn't really matter how scientific you get. You got to score points. Then my last point is, now this is definitely a joke point, but don't let FIU bring their toughness and leadership on the road with them. Don't let them do it. Marshall's got to be the team that brings their toughness and their leadership at home. You can't, even though you got to bring it on the road. We know you got to bring it on the road, but got to bring it at home. This is senior day. This is the last hoorah for a lot of guys. You got to don't let FIU bring their toughness and leadership. Marshall needs to bring theirs. They need to bring it because they sure as hell didn't bring it to Charlotte. So, going to have to bring it for this game. So, there you go.
All valid points. As a matter of fact, we share a few. Number one for me, the Herd's going to win by shaking off the Charlotte hangover. You cannot carry that over into this game. It can't happen. It's got to be over and done with and out of your mind. And if we see any semblance of that early on, this could get out of hand fairly quickly, and we don't want to see that, obviously. Number two, you got to run the daggone ball. We talked about the porous defense, the run defense, that they don't get after they don't rush the passer very well. I mean, that to me says we can move these guys, and we can run, and we should run. And it doesn't all have to be Knox. Why not? Like I said, against Charlotte, we should have seen more, design runs for Xavier Gaines. We should have seen some more design runs for Isaiah Green. Jiminy Christmas, guys. It's really not rocket science. If your opponent has a weakness, you exploit that. Marshall's opponents know their weaknesses, and they seem to exploit them when they can. Number three, you said it, I'm saying it. You've got to actually cover someone. You can't just grab a hold of them and jerk them off of their route or push them out of the way or tackle them in midair. You have to get around and cover. Make a play on the ball. Cut the PIs down. Especially don't do it on third down. Please. If you're going to do it on first down, for crying out loud. And number four, just do your job. If you can't do your job, go to the sideline and sit down and let somebody try to do the job. Okay? It's that simple. The Herd can win if everyone does their job. I don't know what else to say. I mean, it seems straightforward. They seem like they should be able to win this game. I'm not going to say easily, but they seem like they should win this game. It should be all lined up for them now. It's at home. It's senior day. You're facing a team that's underachieving, that's off of a program-defining win. They're poised for a letdown. We say that about Marshall every time they have a big win. They're poised for a letdown. They've already attained bowl eligibility, so they're not fighting for that. Let's see how it goes. How about a 200-proof player this week, Trace?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to get a little creative with it and think of somebody that I haven't said before, but I just ended up saying Brendan Knox because, I feel like he's about the only guy or one of the very few guys that you can count on game in and game out for Marshall's offense, and I'm going to roll with it. But that you made that point about how FIU really struggles against the run, that makes me want to pick him even more in this game because I could really see him having a big game. I mean, maybe not to the extent that he had against FAU where he rushed for over 200 yards, but I think he could definitely get close to that. If they really push the effort to run the ball, I could absolutely see him having a big, big game here. So, other guys could possibly step up and be a, quote unquote 200 proof player, potential, and they could have a really good game, but I just trust Knox more than really anybody else in that offense. So I'm going to go Brendan Knox because I think he's going to have a really good game.
We're along the line, same line of thinking. I'm picking the senior, and I'm picking somebody that won't show up in your stat line. I'm picking Levi Brown because he's a guy you can count on every week.
Yeah,
to play a great game. And, those offensive linemen go underappreciated and often not talked about enough. I mean, we try to do it when we can, when we feel and they are not getting their due. But this week, man, it's senior day. I'm going with a senior. It doesn't seem right not to, or it wouldn't seem right to not choose a senior. And I fully understand that Brendan Knox will reap the rewards of the effort of the offensive line. I get that, but it's senior day, man. I got to go with the guy who's been doing a hell of a job, not only this season, but for several seasons. And when Levi finally plays his last game, be that, bowl game, whatever, he'll go down as one of the all-time greats on the Herd offensive line, period. So give me Levi Brown. He's my dude. Great dude. He's my 200 proof player this week. How about a score prediction, Trace?
Well, my wave of negative juju is going to continue with this score prediction. I'm saying FIU is going to win the game 28-24. I just have too bad of a taste in my mouth. I just have too much just negative thoughts right now. And I try not to get that way because, like, I try to just stay in the middle of, like, you know, irrational good or irrational bad. But unfortunately, right now, I'm leaning more towards irrational bad. And I don't think a lot of what I don't think any of what I'm saying is irrational. I feel strongly about what I've said during this episode so far. And I think a lot of the fans feel the same way. And I think that if you look at it, that's the way that it is a lot of the case. So, FIU's playing a lot better right now. They just beat the U. I mean, Lord, imagine if Marshall would ever beat somebody like that. It's been forever since Marshall's had a win that big. I mean, I don't know. The two teams are coming in very different directions. Marshall's coming in. I think they're going to come in a little bit wounded, obviously. I don't know how they're going to bounce back. FIU's coming in. They're going to come in hot. I mean, they're going to come in on fire, probably go out there and play aggressive football and try to get that 7th win that would guarantee a bowl. And, you know, so, I mean, Marshall probably should win the game, I would say for sure, because, I mean, I think they're a better team overall and they're at home, but, I mean, broken record, here I go again. You can't trust Marshall. I mean, that's just the way it is. But, I mean, it doesn't even matter because, I mean, it doesn't matter if Marshall wins now. They have to have help to even play for a conference title. So it looks like it's bowl game. It's bowl game or nothing. Or, well, they're going to get to a bowl game regardless, but it looks like that's all they're going to get anyway. So 7-5, 8-4 is really not going to be that big of a difference. So, I mean, I'll say FIU wins, even though, like I said, Marshall probably should win the game just based on paper. But
I'm trying to go with the Herd here in a bounce back effort. And, you know, I picked them to win just because it's senior day and they're at home. This is a coin flip game to me. This is not a 73.5% chance to win game that ESPN is picking it. No. This is a coin flip game to me because based on last week, you know, the momentum is at two opposite ends of the spectrum for these two teams. One's going to have to shake it off and get it right, and the other one's kind of riding high and looking to continue their hot streak. So give me the Herd, just like you kind of said, FIU 28-24. Give me the Herd 27-23. I mean, we're like-minded. I'm just flip-flopping it. I've got faith in the Herd to bounce back and win one for the seniors and you know, get a win at home and get to that 8th win so that they can have a better shot at going to a bowl game where they would like to go. But, you know, it's hard to trust them. You said it. I mean, it is. It's hard to trust them. Let's get out of here this week with some final thoughts, Trace. Start us off, and then we'll let Steven close it out. So, Trace, what you got this week?
Oh, I got some sad thoughts. That's what I got. But in the words of Steven Tyler, it's the same old song and dance with Marshall. That's what they are. I mean, this is what they are. It's what they've been for several years, since 2014 or 15, if you want to call it that. But 14 primarily, this is what Marshall has become. A team that has all the potential to be a conference championship team that has everything, seemingly every year, things lined up for them, but yet they always have a game like this. They always have a game like Middle Tennessee that keeps them out of the championship game. It's like clockwork. It's inevitable. It's a problem. It's a coaching. It's indicative of the coaching, period. A good coach, a great coach gets teams to win games like that. We've said it. I said it. That's the way it is. It's just, I mean, and to hear people try to try to tell us that playing in the Go-Mart Bowl and winning 8 games or 9 games every year is a success story, those people are stupid. I'm sorry, but that's not what Marshall football should be playing at the level of what they are. They should be consistently competing for championships. Okay. Here's a start. how about you get to the freaking game once? How about you get there and play for it? I mean, if you lose it, yeah, that would kind of suck, but like at least you're getting there. I mean, they haven't even gotten there in over 5 years. And I mean, this year it couldn't have been more perfect. Now maybe I'll look like an idiot next week and Southern Miss will shock FAU and Marshall will win, but I just don't see that happening. And I mean, like I said, in my opinion, I think Marshall blew it against Charlotte. They blew the whole conference championship contending season against Charlotte. Now, like I said, they're still not out of it technically, but I think they blew it. In my mind, they blew it against Charlotte. And it's just a bad look. I mean, unfortunately, I just feel like this is how Marshall football is going to be from year in, year out under the current regime. I'm not going to start. I remember a few weeks ago, I said, I'm not going to call for Doc's head until I see how this season plays out. Well, the season's almost played out, and I'm getting closer and closer to calling for his head. So I don't know. I mean, I just am not there's not a whole lot of optimism right now, and you can see why. And that's what I said to somebody on Twitter too. It's like, you see how amazing Marshall's soccer team's doing right now. You see how amazing the basketball team has done the last couple of years, or at least 2 years ago, and you realize that those programs have given Marshall more national recognition and national respect than Doc Holliday has managed to get out of Marshall in 10 years. I think that's just the point-blank fact about it. The only year that Marshall football has had in Doc Holliday's era that you can say that they were getting national respect or national attention was 2014. I mean, they were undefeated, and then when they had a chance to go undefeated, you lose 67-66. I mean, yeah, it was still national attention, and they got a lot of respect. They finished ranked in the top 25, deservedly so. But I mean, look what the soccer team is doing right now. They're in the Sweet 16 of a national championship tournament. They legitimately have a chance to win a national championship. They've won 2 conference titles in the same season. They're number 11 in the country. Look what basketball did 2 years ago. They were in the round of 32 in the NCAA tournament, competing for a national championship, winning a Conference USA tournament championship in men's basketball. Marshall football can't even play for the damn Conference USA football championship. Give me a freaking break. I mean, I just don't understand how people can be fine with how it is. Do I want Marshall to win and have winning records and play in bowls every year and win bowls every year? Sure. But if you don't win a conference championship and if you blow it every year like Marshall does, then all bowl games are consolation prizes. And the fact is, it's hard to get excited about the Family Dollar Bowl against a 6-6 MAC team. It's every year you get tired of seeing it. And now if Marshall would win a conference title and then they would have a less than appealing bowl game or bowl opponent, it would look a lot more appealing because Marshall won a conference title. But they aren't winning them. They aren't playing for them. So those bowl games are starting to get less and less impressive. So sorry. I should have started out this whole episode by saying I was going to be as candid as I've ever been on this podcast, but there you go. That's just where I sit with it right now.
Look, to me, in this conference, as top heavy as it is, with 2 to 3 teams being good in each division, any random 3, 8 wins is an 8-4 season in this conference is 6-6.
Mm-hmm.
To me.
Yep.
8 wins to the quote unquote top tier type programs should be the absolute minimum. You should never lose to the historic, struggling, rebuilding, trying to build a program teams. Never, ever. I don't care if it's on the road. I don't care if it's all the way out in El Paso on a Thursday night or a Thursday afternoon at 2:00. It shouldn't matter. In tornado conditions, I don't care. You shouldn't lose to teams like that. You should always line up and beat the teams that you're supposed to beat in this conference, especially if you're a team like Marshall. And as much as I hate to say it, as teams like FAU, who prove that they can consistently win. They had a struggle. They struggled last year, but look, they're poised to be right back in the Conference USA title game. And fans will tell you, man, it could always be worse. What if we make a bad hire? So what? What if you make a bad hire?
That's a loser's attitude right there.
Yeah,
if you say things could be worse, or if you say, well, we're doing better than a lot of teams, that's a loser's attitude.
You're conditioned at this point, 15, 20 years ago, Marshall fans were conditioned for 10 wins, 11 wins, and a conference title and a bowl game. That was what they were conditioned to expect every year. And now they're conditioned to be okay with 7, 8, 9 wins, somewhere in that range, maybe get 10 and compete for some bowl title. I mean, that's what they're used to getting. That's just the meat and potatoes of it. It's a generation of different expectations from fans. Older fans still like to say, we play for championships around here. Well, not really. You've done it once in 10 years. Well, twice in 10 years. One and one. That's not really playing for championships. And like you just said, the soccer team, they're in the Sweet 16 for a national title.
National championship caliber team, potentially.
Yeah. And, by the way, they just knocked off West Virginia University.
Yes, they did.
That's the type of thing you're like, this is that. See, even if you don't win the national title, which is, I'm not saying it's a long shot, but you've got essentially a 1 in 16 chance. Now, that's not great, but it's not terrible. But even if you don't win the title, you're going to say, man, look at that. We won the conference. We won the conference tournament. We went to the Sweet 16 and we beat WVU. That's what you're going to say. So, I'm not saying it's not my job to call for coaches to be fired. It's not. But if your attitude as a fan is, well, I'm okay with 7, 8, 9 wins in a bowl game. I'm cool with that.
Nope.
Man, I'm never cool with that. I'm the type of guy who is like, I want to be playing for a championship every year. I know that's an unrealistic, unattainable freaking expectation unless I'm Alabama, Yeah. And sooner or later, that well's going to dry up too. Nick Saban's can't coach forever. They'll trend downward eventually. But I'm the type of fan that's like, no, man, I want to win every game and play for a title every season. That's that's my expectation. And some people will say, well, you're just setting yourself up for failure. Hey man, that's the beauty of sport, right?
No.
Let me be the way I want to be. You can be the fan you want to be. I got no problem with that. I'm just saying we look at things differently. If you're okay with 7, 8, 9 wins and going to a bowl game, that's cool. I just want a championship. That's what I want. I want banners hanging. I want trophies in the trophy cases. I want all that kind of stuff, because what comes along with that? 7, 8, 9, 10 wins comes along with that, and probably a bowl win, Anyway.
Well, here's another thing I was thinking while you're talking about that. Talking about the late 90s and the early 2000s era where they were just a dominant mid-major program and stuff. People always say, well, it's not going to be that again. That was a special time. They're not going to replicate that. They don't have to replicate that to win this conference.
Right.
You don't have to be 13-0 and a top 10 in the country to win Conference USA football in 2019. Give me a break. I mean, you don't have to do that. You could literally win this conference at 8-4.
Yes.
You could do it. If you just beat the right teams and limit your losses in conference, you could easily do that. I mean, it just makes absolutely no sense. And they don't. My head's starting to hurt.
He just blanked out. He blacked out for a second. He was on rant, and it just went blank. But look, I'm looking at the clock as we're recording. We're almost at an hour and 10 minutes. So that tells me that we are going to have 2 episodes this week. So you're going to pay attention to all those. Steven will be in here in a minute and this, that, and the other. Well, I'm just going to have to do 2 intros, and we're going to have to do 2 everythings because there's no way I'm going to sit here for 2.5 hours because, man, this, you're going to have a Hurt episode this week because Trace was so candid and so open. I mean, no. I'm not making light about that. It was just like you had some things you wanted to get out there, and I'm glad you were able to do that. And we ran longer on this Herd segment than we normally otherwise would. Yeah. So let's just have a Herd episode this week, and we'll have a Western episode this week, and we can spend as much time as Steven wants to talk about that dominating performance against Southern Mississippi. So we'll get him in here when he can join the party, and that's just what we'll do. So We won't even do you can say go herd if you want to, but we don't have a go herd go Dobbs this week. You can just say go herds. How about that?
I was going to say, you set me up and I'll knock it out of the park. Go herds. Go herds all day.
But on that note, we'll get out of here this week. Let's just pull for a big win against FIU because the herd really needs it. Charlotte was a tough pill to swallow, and I definitely feel that put a rift in the fan base again.
Yep.
And one that kind of fell by the wayside these past 5 weeks, but it's back. So if Marshall goes out and lays an egg against FIU, it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be pretty. So let's get out of here this week. I'm going to set you up. You got something else to say?
Nope. Go ahead and set me up.
Okay. All right, Trace, let's get out of here. Take us out.
Go Herds and go Southern Miss.
Oh, go Herds and go Southern Miss. I like that. We'll see you next week. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast, Herd edition. We'll get you your Tops edition right after this. Later.